Hello, this demonstration is about the properties of paint. It's going to be brief because there's so many different kinds of paint and different paint properties. But generally, when you're painting, you want some transparent paint for a wash, which I will demonstrate on this sheet of Bristol paper. So you want some transparent paint, you want some thicker, more opaque paint, and then I'm also going to do some dry brushing. That's more of a technique, but there's many brands of paint. Golden is one of the top of the line because it has such a high pigment content, and very cleverly on their tubes of paint, they put a little swatch of the paint. This is opaque. This one's transparent. If you can see these lines, you know this is a transparent paint. That's the little code, okay? So these are thicker paints that I'll use. They're easier to mix with a palette knife because they're a little more viscous. And then they're fluid, is what it says. It's fluid, but it has a high pigment content, which you'll see when I create a wash. Now, all of this, it's a lot to take in. If you're doing some tests, some of these little cheapy bottles at the craft store are not half bad. They're pretty good. They're liquidy, so they're not as easy to mix with a palette knife, but they're great for warm-ups. Okay, and then there's other brands like I like Liquitex as well, although the paint consistency, it's a little gummier or grainier than the Golden. And the other thing to make note of is sometimes they'll have their student grade, which means there's more filler in the paint and less pigment content. So if you're on a budget, you can do that, but you might be dissatisfied with the pigment coverage. Okay, and then there's also the Artist Loft brand, which a lot of my students buy. I really cannot recommend it because it seems to have so much filler in it and hardly any pigment. So for now, I'm going to focus on, I'm going to lay down a wash with this Golden Fluid Acrylic. So to create a wash, put some of this out. A little bit goes a long way. I like this 2-inch wash brush that you get at the hardware store. The brand is Wooster, and it's just nice to hold in your hand. It's got a flexible silicone handle. This is my go-to, and I think it's around $6. So now I'm going to add some water to that fluid acrylic. You can see how intense the color is. If you don't have this, you can make a wash by adding water to your regular acrylic paint. You'll just need to mix it so there's no lumps in it. Okay, so then I would just brush that across my canvas or whatever surface I'm painting on. There's my wash. And let that dry. You can see I have a ton of paint left, so I could have just put out a dot. So that's the plus of the Golden. A little bit goes a long way. Okay, now I'm going to squeeze out some of this Mars Yellow opaque paint. And some of this nickel azo, which is transparent. Okay, using my flat brush, I'm not going to add any water to this Mars Yellow. I'm just going to take the paint straight, and if I hold it at a low 45-degree angle with my hand over the top of the brush and I drag, that paint is just going to glide off of my brush. That's called impasto. Sounds like pasta, an Italian word. So pasto is paste. So I get this thicker globs. I call it yummy paint. Okay, and then if I carve into it, that's called sgraffito. If the bottom paint was drier, you'd see that blue a little bit better. Okay, dry brush is exactly what it sounds like. It's a brush with no water. If I just dip that or tap that in my paint there and then whisk across the surface, it was already happening here, but it's going to leave a drier mark, and then paint from below will show through. So dry brush, drier paint, impasto, and then I'm going to do some more transparent, I'll do more of this blue on top of blue. So this would be building up more transparent layers of paint. I did some scribbling and then went over, I should see, yeah, I'll see that showing through. If I want to cover over a portion of that, ideally it would be dry, and then I would drag over and mask that. The transparent, opaque, dry brush. You try some of this transparent nickel azo. Okay, that's nice. As it interacts with the blue, it makes kind of a green, almost like a stained glass or tissue paper. Okay, I'll go a little bit thicker. So I can get thicker impasto, but it's still going to be kind of transparent. Now I'm going to do the Liquitex just so hopefully you can see the difference. This is an older tube, but it is sort of, yeah, it's gotten pretty gummy or pretty grainy. It's probably too far gone. Able to revive it a little bit with the water. Okay. So transparent, opaque, dry brush, and then somewhere in between with water, it's a little bit more liquidy, this paint. Now I'm going to try this CraftSmart, this cheapy one. So you can see that this would be a little bit harder to mix with the palette knife. It's too soupy, right? But it's got pretty good opaque coverage. CraftSmart is another pretty good brand. And it's a great way to start or do some tests, depending on your budget. And then, of course, if this dried, or once this dried, if I dry brushed over this, I would pick up on that sgraffito texture I made. But the three basic layers of painting are transparent and opaque paint, wash, opaque, dry brush.